Hello, this is Todd McFarlane, the creator and exec producer of the HBO series Todd McFarlane Spawn. I'll be talking to you for the next couple hours with hopefully a few surprise guests here about the show. And we're going to give some behind-the-scenes things as to the why and the what-fors of a lot of the decision-making that we make here on the series, and some of the things we try to do as we end up making more and more of this, for all intents and purposes, guinea pig show that is playing out in America. Although the types of stories and the intensity that you see within this comic book animated series is something that in Japan and even in certain parts of Europe that is sort of kind of commonplace, but for whatever reason, given that we're all raised on the Disney-esque version of cartoons, that I sort of have to explain myself away on this show to people, especially to the moms of the world. So what you'll see here at the beginning here is, especially right here, the snowflake. Let's just talk about that specifically. The snowflakes are actually a special effect that is used, not unlike what you see in a three-dimensional movie, live-action movie, that in animation you can actually integrate not only the two-dimensional vision that we have here, but you can also go to the computer and help it kind of come in and enhance the story as a whole. In the beginning of this movie here, what we're looking at is just a couple things that have always sort of set Spawn apart, at least in my mind, and continues to set it apart because we don't really have any competition, and that is that the attitude and the atmosphere and the style of this show must sort of have a fingerprint, so that when you watch it, you sort of go, yeah, that's like that Spawn show is like, and you can't really give it a comparison. A, because there's not really much in America that you can compare it to, but B, when we take certain emotions and we tie those to certain characters, especially Spawn himself, that you actually get a lot of visual arrays hitting you, like in this scene right here where Spawn is basically going into a flashback of what sort of his dream images in his head are happening right here. So we have a tendency to do what I would call kind of MTV editing, which is to do a bunch of quick cuts and show a lot of things in a short period of time, so that you almost don't really get a lock on what it is that you're seeing. And the reason for that is that in this particular case, Spawn is still on Earth and is still confused as to why he even exists, right? So what we want to do is when Spawn wakes up from these dreams, I want him to say, hey, what's this all about? But if his dreams are very linear and they make sense to the audience, then we're going to sit there and start to question, this Al Simmons Spawn character, and go, well, hold a second, how can you not interpret your dreams when I just watched it 5 seconds ago and I know exactly what it meant? So in this particular case, he's got the guilt of the Black Knight coming to him. He just thought he got his head decapitated, and then he comes snapping right out of it. Now, he doesn't really know what to make out of that. He's confused. And at this point here, we have a character called Cagliostro that then comes into the scene, and they end up having a conversation about the meaning of life, if you will. Given that this is the third video, I'm always acutely aware of the fact that it might have been a while since somebody saw the last one, and so I have to do a little bit of table setting at the beginning of each one of these videos to make sure that I sort of lay out the groundwork of who the key characters are before we can get into the kind of drama and suspense that we want to. The first half hour of this show you're going to see is going to show us Spawn. It's going to show us the world that he lives in, and it's going to sort of bring in this group of young Italians and buddies that are going to come into Spawn's domain. Later on, once we sort of get the audience comfortable with what Spawn is and where he lives and how he acts, which is what we're going to have here the first 20 minutes, then it's easier for me to then take the stories outside the walls of the alleys and take them into places of the people that either A, Spawn knows and cares and loves about specifically, or take it out to, you know, the detectives or the policemen or the corrupt government officials or even just New York City as a whole, which is, in my mind, where all this takes place. It's just my warped version of what the alleys would be like in a bad nightmare in New York City, Manhattan, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Some of the changes that we've made specifically into the stories is, compared to the first couple videos, is we've tried to limit the amount of fantasy, if you will. Spawn was originally created as a comic book. We've made, obviously, the TV show, the movie, some toys, and other licensed good. And I find that as I get older and I get to know Spawn more and more, I think that his place becomes more impressive and more interesting if you kind of make him really the only fantastic element within the stories. That's what you're going to see in this video, this DVD, more than any other place, is that I've stripped away a lot of what I call the comic book, you know, images and cliches, and try to keep Spawn as unique in this as possible. It doesn't mean we're gonna not meet some interesting characters, and later on we're gonna have angels and a couple of like exciting fights in the action. It's just that if I go back to my original intent of what Spawn was and why I like monsters, when I watched Frankenstein and the Mummy and the Werewolf and Dracula as a young child, they were the only thing in those movies that actually were out of the ordinary. So Frankenstein was a monster, but Dr. Frankenstein was human, and the villagers that wanted to kill him were human, and everybody else was sort of normal. And it wasn't until they got really popular that you started getting The Bride of Frankenstein and The Son of Werewolf Man and all these silly movies. And so I want to go back to those classic versions and try to get closer to that everything in Spawn is actually believable, like these four young hoods here. And what they do is actually believable, and we've actually read it on the front page of a newspaper or someplace in the A section, and put them in a story that says, what if there was one thing out of the ordinary, the boogeyman? What if the boogeyman actually existed? How would it change potentially the story of these ordinary people that now live in Manhattan? So if we take specifically what we're looking at right here, the four gentlemen here that we could hit as between the ages of about 20 and 27. The leader of this band was a voice that was given to us by Eric Roberts. That's Julia Roberts' big brother, who made his impact on movies long before his sister got into it. That we wanted to create four characters that, for all intents and purposes, the average person could say, wow, you know what, that could have been me if I had just gone like 2 steps further at one point in my life. Or when I was growing up, I knew one of those four guys that's now sitting there in this car. It's four guys that are trying to be tough guys, that are trying to, you know, be a little bit streetwise. But somewhere along the line, they happen to just step over a line, and in this case, somebody gave them, you know, a message that said, if you want to be, you know, kind of a tough guy, then you have to do a couple of things that you'd rather not want to do, but don't take it personally. So they end up going, you know, to the restaurateur and literally whacking him. And the leader, the Eric Roberts character, he doesn't really take it. He doesn't even pay attention to it. He's really immune to it. He's almost emotionless to it. It's just part of living on the streets. Now, one of the characters here isn't quite as hardened. He's a college kid, and he's just coming back to visit his friends. And he wants to sort of kind of lead a normal life, and now all of a sudden everything is spinning around him and he can't take it. So the moral dilemma that we're going to try and present here, and it's one of the things that John Leakley and Rebecca Bradford, the writers of the series, and I wanted to do, was to try and give more drama and make this a drama suspense show and not necessarily a pure action show. The reason for that is, although I like the action, you're going to see plenty of it in this DVD here, the answer is that I can only shoot and kill so many people and blow up so many buildings and show so many tank fights and bazooka things and alien invasions before the audience actually gets bored of who these people are up on screen. What keeps characters interesting and what keeps shows alive is that people have a vested interest in who each one of these people are, and they actually care what happens. So if you happen to do a cliffhanger, or you happen to show, you know, a crossroads that somebody gets to, or somebody has to make a decision, then we, the audience, have to sit there and go, oh, you know, I like that character, and, you know, I've been living with them for 2 years, and I hope they don't, you know, go down the path of, you know, evil, because I just want them to be around, and I hope they don't die when the plane crashes. And you have to try and give a sense of value to who each one of these characters are. Now, given that we bring in a lot of strangers like these 4 boys up on screen here, we have to get to that in a very condensed fashion. So what we have here is putting these guys in a way where the kid walking around with his buddy here in the alley has 2 choices. He can either A, put a bullet in his best friend's head and be part of the fraternity, if you will, of the streetwise guys, the tough guys, the punks, or he cannot shoot his friend, and his life ultimately becomes imperiled, because now the streetwise guys are going to turn on him, and he's going to be in just as much trouble. So we've all had to make big decisions in our life, not quite as grand as what's in the show, but this guy now has to go, do I sell my friend out for basically keeping my own life intact, right? So how much value have I placed within the confines of my buddy here, and how much do I want to protect my own personal ass? Now, given that we have a show called Spawn, his decision at that point is taken away from him right now, because our big boy Spawn comes into the act and basically like freezes him and says, you know, get the hell out of here. I don't care what you... Spawn's words are, I don't even care what you do, just don't kill him on my turf. Because again, Spawn isn't out to necessarily be a superhero per se, and it's not what he wants to be if you hear his dialogue throughout the series. But what he wants to do is try and figure out his confusion that he has. And again, we saw the nightmare that he had earlier, and all of these distractions of policemen running through the alleys and cops running through the alleys and the media chasing him, and these kids now trying to dump bodies in his alley. All of it is just a distraction. It's kind of loud music to somebody who's trying to concentrate in silence. And so his only remarks to this guy really are, just get out of my alley, so that I can basically go back in my corner and I can try and figure out what's happening to my personal life, being Al Simmons that's now been turned into a Spawn. Unfortunately, the character Cagliostro that's in here, the old wizened man, keeps telling him that it's way beyond that now. You can't just isolate yourself. You can't just be like a wounded animal and go into a corner and hunker into your cave and ignore the world around you. That his existence does matter, and that his actions can have both a positive and a negative influence on all the things that are happening here. So some of the things that happen in Spawn's world is that he was intentionally placed into the alleyways, and he was put there for a specific purpose. That although he was kind of drafted, his soul was drafted by hell, the way that it works is that heaven actually gets to place you on Earth. So God placed Spawn in the alleys for a reason. Spawn just doesn't know it yet. And because there has to be some kind of portal, doorway that has to open to allow this creature to be dropped in on Earth, it's what we're seeing right now, where everything is sort of frozen in time, and it's the portal. This is the portal now kind of opening here, and it's why there's a bit of a deja vu here with the Al Simmons Spawn character, because he sort of remembers what this is all about here, but he doesn't really understand the reason any more than this young kid here that's running around going, what's it about? Now, we see, again, like a Twilight Zone episode, that every time this kid tries to escape this moment where he has to make a decision, are you going to take the bullet, or are you going to let your friend take the bullet? He tries to escape. Again, here's his second attempt at it. And he comes right back to the exact same moment that he just left, with the bullet, inches from his head, and his buddy standing there with the guns cocked, and his best friend sitting down at his knees. and he can't figure out why every time he turns around he keeps going into the alleys and out in the same spot, into the alleys and out to the same spot. So Cog's going to come out to him now. He's going to try to explain to him that you've hit a crossroad and it's time to basically turn into a man. So what's it going to be? And either way is really going to change his life, because something big is going to happen to him, and it's not really Spawn's duty to actually do anything other than to stand and watch. But again, Spawn being the little emotional aggressive guy like myself when I get pissed off at like executive meetings, that he just stands here and picks his kid up and again reiterates the fact that he's just a punk and he wants him out of the alleyways here. But Cog is telling him that it's like, you don't have any authority here. Since the portal is open, we have to just sort of be spectators in this little kind of staged event here, and we're going to see how these young men are basically going to move forward in their life and see how it changes each one of them. If you had a chance to see a movie called Sleepers with Brad Pitt and Robert De Niro, it's a true story of these 4 young boys that tried to steal a hot dog vendor, went to some kind of boys' correctional institution, were molested by the guards there, and when they came out, they sort of exacted their revenge, but each one of them sort of turned into a different human being, and some guys literally let what happened to them at the correctional institution literally destroy them, and others actually let it make them stronger and have better moral character and became better people for it, although it was a tough way to learn. So essentially that's the story that we're trying to tell here, that when you get to those moments of going, who's more valuable, those around me or myself, those are those very telling things of exactly, especially under pressure, of the true insight to character. Because let me tell you, I've had plenty of partners in my businesses, and when everything's going good and everybody's happy and everybody's making money, like nobody walks around with a frown in the face. And I believe that the true insight to an individual is actually when there's pressure. So if you're at war and you're in the foxhole and you turn to your general and you're under fire, and your general is sitting there shaking and he's nervous, and you're saying, "Sarge, what do we do? General, what do we do? What do you want us to do?" And he goes, I think maybe we should go to the left. You know what? I wouldn't trust that instinct. Any decision made in a moment of panic is not the right decision. A well thought out, thinking about consequence, organized pattern that you can then say, here's the direction we want to go to, is something that I would listen to in my commanding officer, if you will. So what we end up having here in the show is that these young boys are going to have to make those decisions, and at the same time, we have another flashback that has been playing out here of Al Simmons reliving, if you will, his first kill. This is sort of an origin moment where we're saying that up to this point he was a soldier, but he actually hadn't ever killed anybody. But his buddy, who was tied to the stake and had been chopped up, was killed right in front of him, literally. And now it's his emotions are running wild, and they're like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to just walk away, or are you going to exact revenge? And the answer is, bam, we just got it. He just made his first kill, and then he lets it go a little bit more. He gives a false hope to again another enemy. He pulls out his gun. We let it drag out, a little bit of suspense here. We cut to slow motion just to drag out the moment. We play the music. If you listen to the music, it's very haunting. If you actually went back in that moment, you would have seen that the music was overriding any voices. You couldn't even hear the voices. And then he takes out like 3 or 4 more of them. The sergeant comes up to him, tells him that it's like, you know, don't let the demons take you, which is essentially like don't let all of this madness around you make you less of a person than you are. But it's also a key moment, because this is the point where Cagliostro is going to say that this is actually the true moment of when heaven and hell actually noticed Al Simmons. It wasn't when you died years later. It wasn't when you killed your 50th guy. It was at this moment that you showed to them that you were capable of being like vicious, evil, and without emotion in regard to your commanding officers around you, that you could actually be manipulated into a killing machine. This is one of the reasons why, again, Hal was so enamored with him when he died and gave such value to his soul that here was literally a blank slate that could be turned into an evil killing machine. But there's also a point here, too, where heaven could look down and say that the reason he did it was that he thought he was doing it in the cause of justice. So there was a warped sense of logic. Again, we've all seen those stories where, somebody bombs an innocent village, but he was working on the commands of a high-ranking official. So is the young 18-year-old kid guilty of the atrocity, or is it the commanding officers? And we've had the debate happen both in court and in the media off and on ever since the Korean and Vietnam War. This is part of the makeup of Spawn going, he's only trying to protect the innocent by basically serving out his only kind of understandable or self-taught way of meting out that justice, which is you kill the bad guy. I mean, it's simple. It becomes literally black and white to a guy like him. Not too much gray matter here. That it's like, I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy, you killed my buddy, I kill you, and the old eye for an eye, and the score is all even. And it makes complete sense, especially given that he's a patriot and he was trying to do it in war. Now, given that he had to make those big decisions, we now come full circle to the young kids again. And Frankie, which is the key guy here, who had the choice of either shooting his buddy or putting himself in danger. When the bullet became unfrozen, he pulled his buddy up, let him get the first shot, and now we have to say, are we going to end this? Eric Roberts' character says, what's it going to be? Boom. He takes his buddy out. He looks at him. Everybody kind of hangs their head going, okay, well, he hit the crossroad, and he ended up going, potentially the decision that we wouldn't have made, and they went in a direction we wouldn't have gone. But his buddies now kind of congratulate him and say, you're okay. Again, you've made your bones, which is kind of slang in kind of mafia language, if you will, for that you've kind of entered the club, you've paid your dues, and now that you're sort of a made guy, if you will, you're one of us. And now he can go on, and he's going to be accepted in this group. Spawn and Cog are having a debate on, why would heaven and hell allow this? And they're now having a discussion of that. And again, these are all these weird theological things that I bounce around with in my head, that if we have free will, that really, like God or Satan don't have enough of that power over us to be able to dictate whether we're going to be good or bad. Ultimately, we as individuals are the ones that have to make those decisions. Again, if you don't want somebody to call you a drunk, stop drinking. If you don't want somebody to call you a pedophiliac, stop hanging around kids. And if you don't want to be called a wife beater, then don't hit your wife. So I believe personally, as a guy that likes to be in charge of his life, that 90% of what you do is in your control, and 10% of it is actually environmental and kind of big institutions kind of controlling you. But if you don't like broccoli, then don't go to the store and buy it. And if you hate your job, then quit. There's usually simple answers to all this. But the problem is that we all want our cake and eat it too. We want a good job, people like us, lots of money, be famous, do all these things, have a fancy car, have our kids like us, and you find out that to get each one of those comes at a cost, and you have to set priorities in your life as to what it is that's going to be important to you. Obviously, Frankie decided that what was important to him was saving his own ass and living to tell about the story another day. But Spawn, who doesn't trust anybody around him, has now been told to trust the one guy that you grew up with, which was Major Forsberg. And now we're coming full circle here to Major Forsberg, who is hidden away in a cell in the dark, controlled by Jason Wynn, and the guy that he has the most trust for is hidden away. We'll find out later that on top of it, to compound the intensity of Spawn's confusion, that the reason that Forsberg is even in that cell is because Spawn, or Al Simmons before he became Spawn, handed Forsberg, Colonel Forsberg, General Forsberg over to Jason Wynn himself. So not only is the only guy he trusts incarcerated to his worst enemy, but he actually hand-delivered Forsberg to his worst enemy when he was alive. So he has a double guilt there that's going to end up coming out and playing out. As we progress now further into the show here, we now have sort of gotten past one of the opening acts that sort of establishes who Spawn is, what his environment is, and what he's capable of doing. We now have loosened up the chain, if you will, and have now been able to stretch this thing out and can now start to expand this and bring this out into places that reach beyond the alleyways and the Boweries, if you will, that sort of control where Spawn kind of like hunkers down into it. We have another moment here where, again, his mind is sort of confused. Again, if we go back stylistically, and you're going to see it here, that he's going to get angry with one of the bums, and then we're going to start to do some fast, music video kind of cutting. The reason, again, that we do that is that he can't quite pull out these memories out of his head as fast and as kind of sharply as you and I can. And so I liken it to a piggy bank, that if you have a piggy bank and you're trying to get a quarter out of the piggy bank, that you open up the belly of the piggy bank and you shake it, and maybe 10 coins might fall out before you actually get your quarter. And so it's essentially what happens here when Spawn has his weird flashbacks, that he gets bombarded with all the nickels and dimes and pennies of his images before he actually gets to what it is he's trying to figure out. So right now he's going, I got to get up here. I got to stop the bell. There's the lightning happening. There's the clown laughing in the background. He gets flashes of his death and his own graveyard. He gets flashes of his life with Wanda. He lets his emotions get carried away with him. And now he thinks he has some resolution to the problem because he's actually gotten rid of the sound. But then he loses his balance. We give the illusion that it was the clown that had, helping hand in it, but it's just Spawn sort of just going, his vertigo going out of whack, and all of this just sort of coming back to sort of haunt him specifically. So because he doesn't pay attention to anything, he's now put himself in a position where, in this particular case, he actually sort of fails to kind of quell the voices that are screaming in his head, and at the same time, as you can see, does a little bit of physical damage to his own self. We get our mystery man come out of the shadows to drag him away to his sanctorium, which we'll find out here is Cagliostro, the old man that supposedly has the answers, given that he is an ex-Spawn himself, but has no power other than knowledge, and he's trying to impart that upon Spawn himself. What you'll see in this scene here, too, is we built his underground lair to look like the opening. If those of you who originally saw this show on HBO on TV, I was doing introductions myself at the beginning of it, sort of like what Rod Serling did on his shows, and we built the surrounding that I gave these introductions to match this particular background here where Cagliostro lives. And so when people were watching on TV, they would see these images that I was walking by, and then later in the show they would actually see it in animated form going, oh, cool. And we were trying to sort of not have as much space between this kind of, live action intro that I was doing on the TV show and as compared to what was going to be on the actual animated series. And we wanted to sort of integrate me, if you will, into the atmosphere and the attitude of the show. His spawn comes back down here talking to Cagliostro. The conversations between the two men are usually sort of in the same vein, and eventually we're going to get away from it because, again, Spawn's just going to have to move forward here, which is, why am I here? What's my purpose? And Cagliostro, although he's an ex-Spawn, I see him as more of a fatherly figure. And as a father, you don't necessarily know how to get your son to become the president of a big corporation if that's what you want, or to tell him how to be a good lawyer or a good doctor if all you were yourself was a farmer or mechanic or something like that. But you do know how not to become the CEO of a company or a doctor or a brain surgeon if that's what you want for your son. A better life. Essentially, I believe most parents want a better life for their children, we don't necessarily know how to get them there, but we do know how to not get them there. So there are some mistakes that we have made personally that if our if our sons and daughters go down the same path, we know that they're basically not going to advance to the place that we personally might want. That's what Cagliostro is trying to instill here. He's saying that he was a spawn, that he lived through time, that he was stripped of all of his identity and the people that he loved. He ended up taking on some different identities. One of the little kind of tricks we put here was that because he has the Hellspawn powers back then, he ended up taking on a different identity, and his name was Merlin. So the magic of Merlin is actually the power of a Hellspawn. It's nice every now and then to go into history and do a little bit of a curveball so that people go, wow, that's kind of a neat idea. I hadn't thought of that. But essentially, what he's doing right here, Cagliostro, and his anger at Spawn, is to say, you want to become a man, then the first thing you have to do is start to act like a man. Because Spawn keeps saying, I don't want to look like a monster, and I don't want to be a monster, and I want to go see my wife. And he essentially is telling him that the first thing you have to do to be a man is to act like one. Just saying you want to be a man doesn't do anything for you. That you need to start acting like a man. So before you worry about whether your flesh looks like a man, you need to internally actually start looking like a man. So if you don't want your wife to be thinking of you as a monster, then you know what? It's probably not a good idea to walk into her room at 3 o'clock in the morning and walk around dressed like Dracula and scare the shit out of her. So why don't you actually go there at noon and ask her out for a date and try to explain your situation, although he's too sensitive to his actual looks that he won't do it. So essentially, the problem becomes here that a lot of Spawn's problems are self-inflicted, that he wants somebody else to sort of solve what's happened to his new identity here, and he really doesn't want to work at it. And the quest of Spawn that will literally go on for years, I hope, is that he's trying to sort of reconstruct his life back so he can be normal, but it's going to be a physical problem, but more so it's going to be an emotional problem. Because again, you've heard the saying before that, that beauty is only skin deep. In this case, this is literally true for Spawn, that he needs to get people to accept him for who he is first, before he can get those around him to look past the ugliness. And you know what? He lives in Manhattan. I'm sure there's plenty of plastic surgeons that'll do a little bit of a boob job and a nose job for him, and he can sort of look okay and a little bit of makeup. So he can sort of add to some of his physicality. But if he still walks around and acts like a hired killer, he's going no place. He's going no place. We now get into, again, to shift gears here, we can now get into a point that's very important to me to the show, and it's getting into those urban realms. And the urban realms are, again, cops. We love our cops and robbers. And in the comic book, we created, literally, since issue number 1, these two characters called Sam and Twits. They play a huge part in this DVD. And they have in the past couple, but again, they take a bigger part here. They're going to be a big part of the Spawn movie sequel, because again, the movie sequel is actually closer to HBO animated series than the first movie. Because there's a lot of people, especially the older crowd, that go, man, I just love the HBO series, but that movie was, it was okay, but it was a little bit too young for me, and I agree. And all the things that I wanted to do with Spawn, this HBO show that you're watching right now, is actually closer to what I've always envisioned him to be. And so the movie coming out is actually going to take some of the momentum that we've created with this DVD show and use that, which is showing cops and robbers and serial killers, and then just introducing this backlit little boogeyman with the constraints of doing a 3-dimensional movie. In the animated series, it's 2-dimensional, so you have a whole new set of rules that you can play into. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we brought in those cool page 1 stories, again, the cops, and now we have to introduce these other characters. Here we have our token gratuitous breast shot, that we have to have at least one of those in every video, because again, then it just, those 4 kids that just come for the booby shot, we have to have it because they're not going to get it in Lion King, so I have to give it to them someplace here. So, but now that we've given it to them, we kind of, now that's it. And unfortunately, 8-year-old kids, you might as well turn it off now, because no more boobies for the rest of the show. So it's over, the show's over. But now we're actually going to get into the things that sort of make it important to me, which is who is this character and why is she being sent here? This is Jade. She doubles as a reporter, but ultimately she is sort of a messenger of heaven, and her job and her task is to actually come down and kill the Hellspawn. Again, it's not really an original idea that, like, if you have like somebody that works for the devil, to actually somebody from God's side to actually try to like stop them. So like, when people go, oh, that Spawn is so interesting, it's so fresh and it's so new. Not really. The Bible was written before Spawn, and Dracula, who actually came back from the dead, he's been around, and all these resurrection stories have sort of been floating around for decades. So I wish I could say I was doing something original, but I'm not. What I can try and do and incorporate into the originality of it is mix all these things that we do know about. Again, cops and robbers and murder mysteries, detective stories, reporters, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of theology, some action, and put it in a recipe that sort of then, as a whole, looks sort of kind of new, which I'm hoping becomes Spawn, especially in this country especially done in animation. I mean, we don't have anything here in America that sort of is you can liken it to. It was one of the things that when I had like big meetings with everybody, with the whole animation crew, I kept reiterating that we have to keep reinventing ourselves, because if we don't reinvent ourselves, there's nothing to compare ourselves to. There's nothing pushing us. So we're literally in a one-man race, if you will, and the only reason to run faster is because we want to, and it's not because there's somebody breathing down our neck forcing us to push ourselves. And I kept trying to say that it's like that we do a better job than Care Bear or Yogi Bear cartoons on Saturday morning isn't really relevant, because we're not comparing ourselves to the same apples that I think that we're trying to present. That ours is more of a drama show, if you will, a nighttime drama show, prime time series that I would compare closer to something like NYPD Blue on more respects than animation or Saturday morning cartoons. Again, in foreign countries, they do a lot of R-rated drama, and they happen to put it in animated form. They make full-length movies, actually, that do this. They take these shows that are the equivalent to Silence of the Lambs and Die Hard, and they actually put them in animated form, and people like believe that they're into these stories in those countries. We know that this show originally was aired at midnight, and we know that our audience is 18 years of age or older. Then we had to incorporate things that I thought would actually keep them interested over the course of not only a half an hour segment on TV, but in this case on the DVD, close to 3 hours of a kind of full-length animated movie. To accomplish that, I needed to have enough what I would call adult themes in the show. And when you say that, people have a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, okay, well, that means you're going to show a lot of cussing and violence and nudity. And the answer is no. That what it means is you can talk about murder mysteries, you can talk about kidnappings of children, you can talk about corrupt politicians, and it's stuff that usually a 12-year-old kid, when he plunks down his $7 to go to the theater, doesn't want to see. That's why they're more enamored with PG-13 movies, because, again, there's a lot of special effects and a lot of explosions, and as soon as you try to give them Gorky's Park, which was again a spy mystery movie, that they sort of kind of lose their interest because they keep waiting for the explosion, or it's too long in between gunfights to sort of appease their appetite of what it is that they want. They need to be stimulated far more visually than I believe young adults, or more specifically adults, who can actually sit there and listen to people talking to each other, dealing with moral dilemma, dealing with, harsh decisions that have to be made, with being out of control, with losing your job, with not being able to pay the rent, all the things that are actually, you can lump into the education of when we start to learn about death and taxes that become adult themes. And given that I believe that Spawn, when it was originally aired at midnight, had an older audience, and given the fact that those that are Spawn fans keep getting older each year, as we tack this on, we're in the 3rd season of Spawn in the animated series. I'm in the 7th year of the comic book. We're in the 5th year of making toys. We're, it'd be 4 years from the first movie to the second movie, that audience is now 4, 3, 7 years older, and as they get older, I believe their taste and their change in what it is that they want to watch and entertainment will actually go with it. So I'm not trying to walk away from the things that make Spawn cool. I'm just trying to add to it or balance the act of what it is that I believe will give Spawn longevity. And ultimately, as an entertainer, it should be one of your main goals to hang around as long as possible to send your message out, not in a pandering commercial way, because that's the least of what Spawn animated series is. If I wanted to do something that was pandering, I'd have dancing frogs and people doing musical tunes like all the other big guys do. What I wanted to present was story ideas that you sort of kind of get hooked up into, like L.A. Law or like Ally McBeal or like, NYPD Blues, that you start to care about these characters, so you keep coming back to them every week and going, oh, what's going to happen to them next and what's going to happen to them next. At the same time, it also gives me an opportunity to have a little bit of fun with the series in the humor with Sam and Twitch, with the reality of it, with bringing in characters that years ago were named after people that I know or even family members, and staying young, kind of self-indulging, doing something that I believe that the audience as they get older would appreciate, and just continue to rock and roll in a fashion that continues to be stylistic. And by the time that somebody sort of does a knockoff of Spawn in America, I'll hopefully have such a big lead that it'll take them a couple years to catch up to me. This scene that we just saw, that just passed right here, is sort of personal to me because the wife of Spawn is called Wanda, which again I've stated before is named after my wife. But the little girl right there is named Cyan. My daughter, who is now 7, is named Cyan, and she was, the inspiration for this character. But when we got into recording the voices, my Cyan was too old to have a kid's voice. So my 4-year-old daughter, named Kate, who might end up joining us later in this dialogue here, actually would come into Hollywood and do the Cyan voice. So the character Cyan is named after my daughter, the mother is named after my wife, and my other daughter actually gets to do the voice of her sister. So it's a bit of a family affair here. We've stated before that Al Simmons is named after a roommate that I had in college, who him and I have sort of been together now for 10 years doing this Spawn gig together. Terry Fitzgerald, who's also in this DVD, which is the husband of Wanda, is my right-hand man, and in my kind of little Spawn empire. And so I feel very fortunate that I get to have those opportunities where not only do I get to do things that a lot of people can only wish by doing animation and movies and toys and music videos and magazines and just having a good time and all those things you sort of kind of like, watch on TV and go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? But I also can do it in a way that I can bring in my own ideas, and I can have some fun with my friends and family and sort of integrate everybody into this little kind of family affair, so that, again, we don't take ourselves too seriously and we don't get too high on our horse. And even if nobody else likes it, we can have sort of like a little bit of an in-joke and a smile, put a smile on everybody's face, and just sort of kind of move on through it. Now, with the fun involved in there, Spawn, the series as a whole, is not really something that I think most people would call a comedy. It's again, this dark show here, but this scene here that you see is a key moment because, again, this is where I take Sam and Twitch, who are two upper level characters you're going to see a lot of, and for the first time, somebody is actually, one of our key guys is actually IDing Spawn here. In this case, it's Twitch. So Twitch heard from Chapel earlier that there was a character with a red cape, a red cloak, and then he got the name Al Simmons, and so now he's in the alleys, and without even telling his partner, Sam, he actually went into the alleys on his own and is now meeting Spawn for the first time. This is the moment where I believe that Twitch becomes, and you'll see further on, is Twitch becomes sort of like Sir Lancelot to our King Arthur. Spawn is King Arthur, and he needs his Lancelot to sort of kind of act as his hands and his eyes in certain events. And this is the moment where these two guys meet each other, although it's on Spawn's ground and it's on his rules. But there's a certain respect that was just passed along right at that spot in that moment, that now Spawn believes and Twitch believes that if they work in concert together, that potentially they can accomplish more by putting their two heads together than if they work as adversaries instead of trying to track each other down and be enemies, that the two of them together can solve the mystery of what's going on in the alleys and the corruption a lot faster. It's one of the reasons why Twitch earlier went to Lisa Wu, the reporter who he'll find out is an angel. So he's really kind of caught up in the middle of this kind of storm that is kind of pulling all these dead bodies now, the government, the heaven and the hell aspects of our story, and he's stuck in the middle of it. He's trying to bring some of the clues now here to light to his partner Sam and to his police chief Banks right here, and he's talking now how he has some clues as to who's going to be the bad guy here. Unfortunately, he's unaware that Chief Banks is also tied to Jason Wynn, who he believes to be one of the guys behind this, and Jason Wynn is given the order to basically eliminate Twitch. Because Twitch has a blind faith in the law system, he's completely caught off guard right here. And again, we slow it down. We do a little bit of trickery here with the images. We we try to do some dramatic things like the upshot that wipes out. We see the moon, and then we should be fading to black here. And again, it's just a little trick.
Get a goddamn ambulance down here! Jesus, he's bleeding hard from his head. Officer down!
And Sam comes in, as you can hear.
Twitch is down!
And his panic sets in, and we just wanted to set that moment up very quickly that Sam was on top of it. We now then come back in and reestablish the glasses, and Sam is right on top of him. And here comes the perpetrator here, who's acting completely innocent. And for all intents and purposes, we don't know whether Twitch is actually going to pass through all of this. In terms of some of the animation qualities of what we tried to introduce here too, so far, if you compare this show specifically to what we had done on the first couple of DVDs, then I think that you'll see, at least I do, a more consistent aspect of the color. That I believe now in this DVD that we finally have gotten to the point, and we can always improve it, and I will continue to try, but we finally got to the point where I believe that all these places that we show in these 2.5 hours are all within the same world. Some of the inconsistencies we had in the first couple of DVDs and videos and series on HBO was everybody was trying to learn how to do adult animation, given that there's nothing to compare it to, and so it was a guinea pig. And along the way, even when we sent it over to Japan, we would have different teams doing it, and one would be nice and dark and somber, and the next one would be happy-go-lucky Saturday morning, because that actually is more the mentality of the people that sort of work in animation. They're not used to doing that. And I had an inconsistency not only in terms of the way that the shadows played a part in the show, not only in terms of the way that the backgrounds look, but more importantly, the color. Like, the color is so key to this show that right now, this shot here with Cagliostro's face backlit, you know, I don't understand why in animation black isn't a color. Well, not only is black a color in our show, but it's actually the primary color, if you will, in our series, because this show, for the most part, takes place at 3 o'clock at night, and there's not much light any place. I don't care what city you live in at 3 o'clock at night. Even in your own house, there's not a lot of light. And so everything on our show here has to sort of match what it is that we're talking about, which is ghosts and goblins, if you will, and boogeymans and nighttime slayings and cops betraying cops here. And all this stuff usually takes place in the middle of the night when we're asleep, because we pick up the newspaper in the morning and we read about it. Most people don't do it at high noon in the middle of the desert with 5,000 people looking. What they end up doing is they try to commit their evil acts, if you will, at night, which is why a lot of the things that I bring in, the kind of the theologies that I pull into the show and in the comic book, stuff like that, is based upon these sort of stereotypes, right? If the sun's out, that's when the goodness is out. If the sun is down, that's when evil things happen. And in the big picture of, even as simple as drafting souls, which is what happened to Al Simmons here, that if the souls went away, if Mother Nature, which is, again, a whole other story that will come up, where Mother Nature, to me, is actually stronger than both heaven and hell, because if she poisons the air and she poisons the waters, then all the humans die. There's no souls to fight over. She can literally make God and Satan not have any ball to play with, because the ball they like to play with is souls. And if she annihilates the air and henceforth suffocates the humans, which she wouldn't because she's Mother Nature, but if she did, then there are no souls to battle over. And if there's no souls to battle over, then again, what does God and Satan fight over, given that they want to get to Armageddon and they want to show their dominance over the other party? The answer is nothing. So I sit there at night and I think of these little silly stupid things and go, how impatient is heaven and hell, God and Satan, if there's no human beings? Well, if they're 5-year-old boys and they got sent to the room by Mama Nature, then they're going to look for an excuse. And so if they draft souls, then why wouldn't they draft the animals? They sit there and they go, oh my God, by the time the amoeba splits and it turns into a gorilla and eventually gets into a man, a caveman, a prehistoric man, and we can start to fight over his soul again, that might be 1 billion years. So let's start fighting over the animals. So if we use that, then, and we were sitting there saying it's a draft of not only the souls of the humans, but souls of the animals, then let me just throw it out to you and see if you don't have the same knee-jerk that I believe we all have. If there's a puppy dog, who do you think drafted the puppy dog's soul? Well, of course, it has to be God, because he's a cute little guy and he's nice and neat. Now, if I was to say a tarantula, then who drafted the tarantula? Well, of course, it has to be Satan, because it's an ugly little, creepy little thing, right? We actually have these mindsets that if I could sat there and I went snake, dove, bunny, rat, bat, kitty cat, that we would have like bugs, maggots, that all of a sudden we go, we actually hate some of the animals around us, not because they're vicious, but because they just don't look good. We think they're creepy, henceforth they're bad things. And in a weird way, if we extrapolate that into some of the theology of Spawn, that's sort of kind of where we've got in this show, God and Satan going, they're drafting these things where God would go, well, I'll take Mother Teresa because she's a pretty good little kid and she's like the puppy dog. And Satan's going, oh yeah, well, I'll take that Hitler and that Son of Sam and that Al Simmons character because they were actually out there annihilating people, and I can mold them into my own likeness, if you will. Now, do I go and say all this in this show? Absolutely not. It's just sort of like a backstory to all of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. But if I don't have an understanding of why all these people act the way they're supposed to, then I can't sort of get through it, right? So, again, as we get into it, again, here's the introduction of again, another important character, which is Granny Blake. She's patterned after my wife's grandmother. She comes from Russia. She recently passed away. She lived to be 97. But she had an insight to her that really nobody around her could sort of delve into. Now, she wasn't blind, and I had to put that in there because if she could see that this was Al in his skin right now, she would say, hey, Al, you're back from the dead. But unfortunately, what she becomes that nobody else can give to Al Simmons right now is she is the most faithful person in this show. She's the one that without missing a beat, will go to church every single weekend, will get somebody to read the Bible to her. She'll read her little Braille book. She'll listen to Praise the Lord on TV and all these kinds of shows. She'd even be suckered into giving $20 to some, shyster at the door if she thought it was going to something good. And she thinks that there is a higher power, more stronger than anybody else in our show. She also, because of that belief, thinks that Al is an angel at this moment, right? That she's talking about him now living in the church near God, sitting at the side of God, and that now that God is using him as a weapon of good because, again, in her mind, Al Simmons was a good man and was married to her granddaughter and always treated her with dignity and respect and put a smile on her face and was able to share jokes with her. So why wouldn't this man, when he died, have gone to heaven? I've yet to meet the one person who said, my uncle died. I know he went to hell. He's the son of a bitch. It never happens that way, right? When you get to the funerals, it's like all you remember is like the good parts, which is how it should be. And it's really an overcrowded place if it's true, upstairs in heaven, because that's where everybody went. I don't think that anybody's is denying the fact that maybe a couple of them trickled downstairs, but it's probably they're getting overcrowding upstairs. And she believes that Al is an angel returned, and not in physical form, but in spiritual form, and is just overlooking the world here, and is kind of watching over her and Cyan and Wanda, and he now can't say out loud to her that not only am I not an angel, I'm actually quite the opposite, and not only am I the opposite, but that Bible you've been reading isn't quite as accurate as you would like. Why? Because he'd give her a heart attack, and he loves this woman so much that he won't say to her what he now believes to be true, which is there is an afterlife, but it's not what's written in the Bible. It's something way beyond anything that I can personally comprehend. And unfortunately, I don't want to break your faith in a higher power in God, because again, you have such a perfect vision of it. And so if you want me to be an angel, I guess I'm just gonna have to keep my mouth shut, and I'm gonna have to act like an angel. At the end of that scene, the little girl, Cyan, that again is played by my daughter, says to Granny Blake, that's the sad man. I believe that it's as close to an accurate description, a truthful description of what Spawn is at this exact moment as anybody can give. And again, children seem to cut through all the BS and can get straight to the heart of the matter. And little Cyan in this show doesn't worry about any of the other things that we're watching at and looking at as adults. She just sees this man who sort of stands there and doesn't have a smile on his face, although he's wearing a mask. I don't know how she would know, but and just can tell by his demeanor that he's not really a happy guy, and she's sort of in tune to it because she sort of feels for the guy, right? And it is important because it's the quest that we have to keep pushing Spawn through to go, how can you get beyond being the angry man, the sad man, the confused man, and how can you start to piece these points together? And once you do piece them together, you will be on the road, on the path to becoming a true man, which is essentially what he wants. He wants to become a man again, but he can't do it if he's in these states of mind that he's been going through for the last couple of shows. And you'll see as we get further, and especially at the end of the DVD, he makes his first, what I believe, big giant step forward to going, okay, I'm now going to get proactive instead of reactive into being like Al Simmons again, even though I now accept I am Spawn, this guy who has all this bizarre things happening to him. One of the comments that people have is like, they don't like the fact that sometimes he whines in the alleys way more than he should about like, why am I Spawn, where's Wanda, why am I Spawn, where's Wanda? But again, if this is going to last for 50 years, this character, I don't want to sort of kind of like, show all my aces like right in the first couple of years and go, oh, okay, here's all the answers to this character, and now there's nothing interesting to discover. At the same time, you risk that if you go too slow, you can turn your audience off because, again, they want more meat and potatoes and substance from the main character than you're willing to give them. Because I'm aware of this, that's why I introduce these other characters that I can delve into. I can give you more of their origin and more of their history and more of their emotions and do it in a condensed version, like the 4 kids that, did the whack job on the Italian restaurateur, earlier. I can get into their life. We're not going to see them again. And I can sort of condense it and give you all of their emotions and tell you who they are and get them out. And I don't care if I spilled the beans on them because I'm not necessarily making a show of those people. For Spawn, I have to pace myself. And what I'm hoping to try and do is that by putting somebody like Terry Fitzgerald here in this scene into a situation that sort of is compromising to his job and to his family and to the safety of those around him and his own personal well-being, that maybe we get distracted by the fact that we don't have all the specific concrete answers as to who and what and where Spawn is. Again, you will have seen in that scene that took place a little bit at night that one of the tricks we had to do, and one of the things that we continue to do, is that when we go in and edit the show, we take the show, and if it's a little bit too bright, like I was talking about, we turn it down, but then we put like little gray screens on it. You'll see it in this one. It's like at the top third of this scene, and so it covers Jason's eyes. And it makes it like there's a shadow in there that wasn't originally there on the animated stills itself. We've got one now off to the right of this one, so it looks like that the outside his window, it's getting darker off to the right. All of that was added in what we call post, which is after the fact. That we got it back from overseas, and we're just trying to give, again, as you can see, it's a little bit of a triangle there on the right when we get the full shot. We're just trying to create either false shadows, or we're trying to take some of the color edge off what it is that we have. Why? Because sometimes I think the colors pop too much and they get a little bit kind of coloring bookish. And it doesn't fit into what we've just been watching for the past hour. We need to make all of this way more consistent. Here is one of the few moments where I actually introduced the clown. Again, like I said, I'm trying to strip the kind of the fantasy comic book elements, like I said earlier, and keep Spawn as unique as possible. But I can't lose everything that sort of makes up, the body of Spawn and some of the things that actually initially intrigued people to actually come to the party that we kind of have as the years go by, called the Spawn universe. So what I've done is I put them in at key moments so that you just go, oh yeah, there is something a little bizarre and a little hidden and lurking in the shadows at all moments, so that at any given time the show can sort of like literally be thrown a curveball and the audience sort of accepts that the world is a little odd and the trickery can kind of come into play, and it's not like out of the blue and that people go, yeah, okay, fine. It's like he's just putting that in there because he just needed something because he hit a dead end in the story. So all those elements of heaven and hell and angels and demons, which is essentially what the clown is, they're all there. They're just lurking further and further in the shadows than what we originally had in the first 2 seasons of Spawn. And so this is more, again, trying to captivate the audience's interest, not only in Spawn specifically, but in more realistic characters, if you will, instead of trying to get them hooked up into comic book characters. I want you to feel the angst here of Wanda having her husband sort of run out on her because they just had a marital fight, and that she's like going, I don't know if he's ever going to come back, and what's happening to our life. Here's Jason Wynn here, who's been in complete control of all of the situations for 3 seasons now, and for the first time the kinks in the armors are coming here. He's heard that Terry Fitzgerald has sold him out. Later on, you're going to end up seeing that he can't get in touch with the president's office. Here's now some of the government people coming in here saying, we want to see Wynn, because, again, his sort of web is starting to fall apart. Jason just basically gets up casually because, again, he's not one to basically panic, and he walks literally out the back door just in time to see the people that have come for him. He took all important documents out of the safe, and although he did it in a very polite fashion, his world is now starting to begin to crumble, and Jason Wynn is now going to go on the defense while he's always for 3 seasons been on the offense. We now come up to, again, a moment here where Cagliostro said, if you want to be a man to your wife, then you have to act like a man. You have to treat her like how you would want to talk to her. He can't bear the fact that he wants to come back to her as Al Simmons, a man from the grave, because he thinks it'd freak her out. So instead, like a peeping Tom, he was sitting in the bushes. He saw Wanda lose her husband as he drove away, and so he used his costume to turn into Terry, not himself, but Terry, so that he could get close to his wife because he was too afraid to tell her the truth. And now we get to actually have the moment where, for the first time, he actually gets to be with his wife since his death. And again, it becomes a betrayal because, again, he's with his wife and he's intimate with his wife in a way that isn't who she thinks he is. This scene, when it first came back from overseas, was so, talk about gratuitous, and so many like little humping motions and booby shots that it was appalling to me, and I don't get appalled too often. But again, that's where editing sort of comes in, that we just stripped in all of those kind of hand-holding, caressing moments, some nice little music on top of it, and you ended up getting a love-making scene instead of a porking scene, which is essentially what they had delivered back to us. So the magic of editing is really amazing, that when we get the shows initially from overseas, it's when we actually sit down and go, now, I can honestly tell you that the reason this show is actually quite stylistic is because we have to get by some bad animation, that there's no other way around it other than to do some quick cutting, do some little trickery, do some white hot flashes. There's a fine line between just covering your mistakes and actually, putting, some chutzpah into your show. And I believe that it always belonged there, but sometimes it's there for specific story element reasons, and other times it's there, I hate to say it, because again, we just got such bad animation, we just got to throw some arty-farty stuff on top of it and cover our ass. Again, here's where now we introduce the angel character, Jade, to the devil character, if you will, the messenger that had worked for the devil, Cagliostro, and now we're starting to tie and tighten the web a lot closer, as saying heaven and hell are going to get into a confrontation here, because all the players on the chessboard are starting to move closer to the center. The center obviously being Spawn, but Cog is there, Jade is there, the Sam and Twitch and the reporters are starting to come towards him. Some of the people in the alleys are starting to talk about him, and everything's starting to move towards Al Simmons' Spawn, although he is still trying to act like he's in denial that none of this is actually happening. We just have the moment here where Spawn finally woke up. His magic powers, if you will, that can convert him into a human, does not allow him to keep the identity, the flesh on him for more than a couple hours at a time. So even when he turns himself into Al Simmons, his skin will eventually rot back to being the Spawn that we all know, which is the burnt corpse. That is his true identity, and that the flesh that's on him is only there for a temporary period of time. It's like putting hand lotion on. Eventually it wears out and you have to put some more on top of it. So he comes back to Cagliostro, asking him how he got through it, given that he was a monster. And more importantly, like, why is all this stuff again happening to him? Cagliostro then begins to tell him that he better watch his back, because the agents of heaven are now upon him. And one of them is, again, these warrior bitches, really, that come down, and that they basically have the same viciousness as those that basically work in the guard of hell. I've always believed that the people that work for God have to be just as vicious as those that they go after, because otherwise, like, if you're going to go make your bet in Vegas on who's going to win Armageddon or the apocalypse, it's going to be Satan and his boys. Because if you're going to have, again, Genghis Khan, and you're going to have a Son of Sam, and you're going to have Hitler, and you're going to have all the psycho killers, Charlie Manson and that on one side, and then you're going to have all the volunteer bingo ladies down at the YMCA on the other side, then when it comes down to that big battle, I hate to say it, those bingo ladies ain't going to stand literally a hope in hell. And we know exactly what's going to end up happening there. So we have to introduce the idea that, again, screws with everybody's sort of kind of Sunday school teachings, that the angels, the warriors, the messengers of God, of heaven, can come in any size and shape and form possible, because, again, in love and war, everything is possible. Now, to reiterate that point, we now go into this story arc here. And this story arc here is introducing us to kind of street urchins, if you will. The voice here of one of the characters that we're going to see coming up is done by Jennifer Jason Leigh, who's had a fairly long and prestigious career in filmmaking. It's one of the things that we wanted to do in the show, and especially in the third season, is try and create roles for true actors, if you will, that would come in there and, like The Simpsons, go, wouldn't it be cool to do a voice for, one show and kind of get out? We had Eric Roberts come in. We've got Jennifer Jason Leigh, the voice of Major Forsberg is done by Robert Forster, who was, up for an Academy Award for Tarantino's movie Jackie Brown, and has had a pretty long career. And so one of the things that I'm trying to establish here is that, can we get, music bands to want to do, some soundtracks for, the movie, and can we get kind of not voice actors for all these characters, but actual movie stars, if you will, quote unquote, to come in there and give some of the voices, because again, it's just something, that's a little interesting to listen to. Just, much the same theory as to why Disney comes in there and brings in Mel Gibson and Meg Ryan and those type of people to come in there and add a little bit of, sex appeal to what it is. But unlike their opportunities, mine are that you can bring in somebody who's kind of a nice guy and say, hey, you can either be a nice guy, we've got plenty of those, or you can actually play against type, right? So you can actually take a guy like, let's say, Tom Hanks, and say, Tom, you're a nice guy, but he loves you, you're a Boy Scout, and you can either A, play this nice little policeman who's going to save the day in the show, or we can make you like a pimp. Wouldn't that be cool? And then you do drugs, and then we decapitate you at the end. Wouldn't that be neat? And as weird as it is, some of them actually get a jolly out of that they're going, I would never play that role specifically in a movie, but I can actually be the voice of a character that might not be what I normally would play in the movies, and that they can sort of come in there and have a little bit of fun with it. So hopefully, as Spawn goes through the year, our kind of cast of voices actually will continue to grow here. And like I said, here's the character here that Jennifer Jason Leigh ended up playing. And when she came in there, you can see that she's trying to read the lines that we give her when she's in studio in a way, and trying to interact with the other voices in a way that she's acting it out. If anything, the weird thing is when you actually bring in the true actors, if you will, into the studio, they forget that you have to actually put your mouth to the mic and not turn your head. They always want to turn to the other voices and talk to them, because again, they're used to doing that on camera, actually speaking to the other person. And a lot of times we have to go, excuse me, Miss Lee, could you speak into that little black mud? And by the sixth time you're like, excuse me, Miss Lee, do we have to fire you here? But they usually come around very quickly, because again, it's something that they go, okay, got it. Because sometimes you actually isolate them. What's a little bit odd to them too is that they do the voices sometimes away from the people around them, so they're actually talking to themselves. So it becomes a little bit harder for some of these people when they come in for the first time to actually say, okay, I think it's kind of cool because A, it's a one-day gig. It's not like a 90-day gig like making a movie. B, I don't have to do any makeup or hairdo, so it's cool to see them come in there in their sweats and their blue jeans, and their hair's not all primped up, and they're like, oh, cool, man, nobody's taking pictures of me. And they come in there and do the voice, and they're not around anybody. They're in a booth by themselves, just sort of talking. So it's there's pros to it, but again, you have to sort of reteach them to sort of get into the groove. But the one thing that does come out of it is that they read their lines in a way that has, the emotion for that character specifically tied to who they are, and they really sort of kind of put themselves into it a little bit more so than some of the voice actors and actresses that have to, on some shows, do 3 or 4 voices. They can't necessarily devote as much time to the one voice and get out of there. They have to sort of go, I got to make this character so different than the next 3 voices that I'm going to be doing in the show. I'm concentrating more on voice tonality than potentially some of the acting, which is again some of the pluses and the minuses of bringing different people in with different expertise levels. If we continue to go back here to our show here, again we've got A Body in the Alleys. Again we've got our adult drama. We've got our cop killing stuff. We've got Spawn. Another body is being dropped into his alleys. We've got a couple clues there, in terms of like what was handling. We've got our runaway, our lady that's being sort of kind of followed by the thuggery of the alleyways, the pimps and the guys who run these kind of strip parlors and stuff, trying to come in there and sell her a bill of goods as to, we'll take care of you and we're security and, we'll make sure you get like, a nice room. And they literally try to get them into their trap of coming into the New York way of life and getting them before they actually go and get a decent life. Why? Because it's Manhattan, right? And for all of us who don't live in New York City, we think that like that city is like a beast in and of itself. It literally, I've had friends, and it's actually somewhat true, that go into that city, and because of the high cost of living and the fast pace of it, it actually eventually makes you somebody who gets acclimated to it and can actually become tough and live in that city for 25 years. Or within about 5 or 6 months, it actually says, you have no money, you have no place to live, and you have to move to any other city on the face of the map right now except for New York, and you have to get out of there. I've also been up and down the streets of Manhattan plenty of times and seen the characters literally. There's a plethora of stories to be told of people on the cool streets, near Port Authority. And although, the mayor, Giuliani, is trying to clean it up, and take some of the kind of the fun out of these people watching streets that are in New York. These people do live now in other corridors. They just hide themselves a little bit better, much like Spawn in the show, that seep out and try and take these people who come off the buses and try to warp them into their kind of point of view here. We also are taking that kind of, lost soul, runaway, castaway child who's trying to come to New York and has stars in their eyes and wants to become rich and famous and going to do something on Broadway and going to be a legitimate actor or actress, although they'll probably be in the next porno flick, Debbie Does Denver, and that's actually going to be their claim to fame. But again, in the meantime, their naivety is something that can be preyed upon by these people. We lay that on top of, again, the follow-up of Twitch, who, again, has recuperated from his head wound, but still has the bullet in his head and can't quite remember exactly what it was that happened and or who the perpetrator was that actually pulled the trigger and shot him. Now, we, the audience, know, but this is now the quest that Twitch has in terms of trying to solve this dilemma. In a weird way, it parallels what's happening with Spawn, and in the scene, he's asking the same questions again to Cagliostro of how do we make sense of all that's around us, and I can't sort of put it together in my own head. And Twitch now is a scaled down version of that same scenario, which is why, as I said earlier, they sort of become these partners that King Arthur has as Sir Lancelot, that they sort of can look at each other and wink now and say, I sort of understand why it is that you think like you do, because I've been down, that path myself now. Cagliostro is a little more abrasive in doing it. He's trying to say, I've been down that road too, but you keep taking the wrong turns. The two things that really are important to any human being really are their decisions first, and then equally as important is the reason for the decision. Because again, you can have a kid say, okay, am I going to drop this bomb on this village? Yes or no? The answer becomes, well, yes. Okay, so there's a decision. It tells you something about the character of that person. But then the follow-up is actually gives you more insight, which is, why did you drop the bomb? And then again, the 18-year-old kid says, well, I'm a patriot. These are the enemies. My commanding officer said I was to do it, and it was just out of a sense of duty. So there's a warped sense of logic out of everything that we can do. Even serial killers have been documented for as heinous a crime as they do, and for as bizarre of the atrocities that they do on people after they even kill them. They sort of have some logic in their head as to why they can justify it. Because otherwise, if we didn't, we would just be going, oh, we're just insane and we do insane things. Nobody will actually say that out loud. Even the kooky guys, right? Charlie Manson will give you literally a 400-page book on like why he was justified in doing some of the things that he did. Now we, as from the outside, go, because he's a psycho fuck. I mean, it's like we can condense it very quickly, right? But he actually could give you a 3-hour dissertation on the rationale and why everybody else around him is kind of kooky. Now, unfortunately, it's that sort of second level that I'm trying to go to. Again, this adult theme stuff that we've been talking about, that says that if you take the logic, the reasoning, the insights to these characters, you mix them with a little bit of theology, you mix them with a little bit of action, you mix them with again, the things that an 8-year-old kid isn't interested in. You have like good drama and suspense, and you got characters that are kind of cool. And again, you start to throw a little bit of a curveball, like right here. What's the fallout of Twitch being shot in the head? Well, A, he now is a little bit step closer to Spawn himself. And B, he now has sort of, I don't want to say a deja vu, but he has a clairvoyance that he sort of now can look at these bodies and sort of almost see in his mind what happened. Again, they're asking him right here, if you watch the show or you switch me off on the audio, like, why, how do you know this, Twitch? And it's like, I don't know, I just sort of can tell it. And Sam, his partner, is actually quite concerned because he's sort of making up stuff that nobody can actually attribute to being a fact. And he's sort of worried about his partner. Is he slipping into a place where maybe that bullet wound is more damaging than anybody thought, and he shouldn't actually have left the hospital. He should have stayed there until he was fully mended. And again, it's just getting kind of weird and spooky. He's talking here about like how far the killer got away. Again, this was the guy that had met the Jennifer Jason Leigh character at the Port Authority terminal there, or the bus terminal, whatever you want to call it, in New York, and saying that it was a savage beast that sort of kind of brought this guy down. And again, it's like, oh, okay, Spawn sort of got angered at all of this. Sam saying to Lisa here, like, forget what my buddy did, because he's not in his full capacity right now because of the injury, and don't report any of this in the papers, and I'll give you an exclusive later, but I got to take care of my buddy right here. But now, again, Twitch is sort of, without trying, getting these flashbacks that are coming to him, much in the same vein that Spawn had, of this confused state of information that's around him, but he doesn't know how to sort of put it together. So it's like opening the box of a puzzle, and you know that all the pieces make one unified photo because you can see it on the box cover. But looking at the pieces individually, you sort of can't see that in your mind's eye until it's sort of kind of done. And now his partner has to sort of deal with the fact, Sam has to deal with the fact that his partner, who has been really kind of the brains of the operation, is maybe starting to lose his grip on reality just a bit. And what will that do, A, to their case they're working on, B, what will it do to Twitch's career, and C, what will it do to Sam's career, given that if his partner goes away, then where are they going to side shuffle him, and or is he going to get painted by the same broad strokes as Twitch? Because if Twitch starts talking weird right now, then are they going to think that Sam is in cahoots with them with all this like weird and bizarre stuff? You know what? We try not to be that heavy with this and try to hit people over the head, but again, it's all the rationale and the reason that we have as we try to write the stories, and I'm in confrontation or in conversation and conference with John Leakley and Rebecca Bradford, the two writers of the series, that sit there and go, here's some of the rationale behind what it is that we do. I try to give them some feedback. They kind of bring in all the great story elements there, and we try to just sort of string it all together so that, at least initially, when it's on the television show for 24 minutes, people watch it, and it seems like it was actually 45 or an hour. Again, we get into... again, another moment here where we then discover that the person that was killed in the alleys was actually killed by the Jennifer Jason Leigh character, who was not what she appears to be. Again, like I said before, we've set up that all these things are lurking in the shadows and that everything isn't what it appears to be. That there, right now, this moment right here is that there's Jade, who is a messenger of God, we find out. And it's like, well, how can she be a messenger of God? She's a vampire. Well, the answer is, if we go back to the drafting, and that there's going to be a big war, and there's going to be the apocalypse, and it's all about one side winning the other, God would be a complete fool to draft nothing but YMCA volunteer bingo ladies. He will completely lose that fight. So what does he have to do in return? He has to get to the moment where sometimes it predicates him to draft into heaven Genghis Khan. Why? Because if he can take Genghis, turn him to his way of thinking, and put him on the battlefield against hell, Genghis Khan, in a warped sense, my warped sense, will actually be somebody that could serve a good, useful purpose for heaven. At the same time, if Mother Teresa was to die and God and Satan was to pick her, it wouldn't be because she's going to be a bad gal. It's just that he would take her and shove her in a corner and make her bake cookies for all the people that are being tortured and tell her not to do anything, but she won't be able to be used as a good weapon for God. And so he's sort of kind of what we call, in my vernacular, dick blocking. He's dick blocking God of getting a good soul. And so it's not about, well, you're bad, you go to hell, and you're good, you go to heaven. This is the gray matter that I introduce into the show. And so we're now at the point where we're saying, whoa. You've now come up with a story where vampires can be on the side of heaven? Absolutely. Why? Because if it serves God's purpose to basically end evil by using people who were initially evil themselves, then so be it. Again, like, everything is fair in love and war, and this is war. Jade, when she had the conversation in the bathroom a few moments ago, she's also another messenger of God. But again, I see like heaven as being so big, kind of like a corporation, that they don't sometimes cross-reference each other's sectors or divisions. So there's two angels down here for two specific purposes. One is to try and test the Spawn and try and see if they can redeem him. And the other one is literally a warrior that's out to kill the Spawn. Plain and simple, and that there's really nothing more to it than that. And so now you have two angels kind of barking at each other in that scene, going, why are you here? You don't have permission. And it's like, no. I have permission. They forgot, they did some politics on you, if you will. And they forgot to tell you what those politics were. And now all of a sudden, like, you're the one that's caught with the short end of the stick. And so it's all this kind of breaking the taboos, like I said, of a lot of the Christian stereotypes that we're taught ever since we're a kid, and putting them into a milieu here that sort of is kind of interesting and makes a little bit of sense, somewhat in a weird way. But more importantly than that, it just sort of has this look at animation and drama and storytelling in kind of a fashion that we've never seen in a story, that with all these components put together become a little bit more unique than they are if I break them down individually, because I can't say that any of this stuff is kind of fresh and new. Although that whole puppy dog and bat drafting thing, I'll take credit for that one right there. This is a moment here where Spawn, comes up to the angel. He didn't really even know what her whole purpose sort of is about, right? And he sort of kind of like is kind to her and is like saying, we've both lost everything. We don't have our life. She's a vampire. She's still a vampire. She comes back from the dead. But they both are playing on different sides here. And in a few moments, he'll be betrayed by her. And we'll go, okay, fine. Because she died and was turned into a vampire, not by actually being a true vampire, but because of being touched by the curse of a spawn. And if you actually analyze this, the spawn kind of legend that I built, it's not that far from what a vampire is. He lives in the dark, he's got the big cloak, he's resurrected from the dead, he's stronger at night than he is during the daytime. So there's a fine line between, are there such things as vampires, or are they all just hell spawns? We've just given them different names, right? So they just are the Hatfields and the McCoys, but they're actually kind of the same things now. So now Spawn has been betrayed by her, and he can't believe that that God would send, because she's exposed herself to him, that God would send a girl, as he calls her, to basically kill him. But we just got a quick moment there that we argued about for a while, where we saw her teeth kind of bear out a little bit alien-esque, and it was a moment again that you know, John Leakley, the writer, didn't want to have. But I thought it was important because I didn't want her to be like human in the truest sense of the word, that we actually need to get those moments where we see her red eyes and we see those little teeth and we go, she's not really a girl from Nebraska that just came as a runaway. She's actually something else. Now, what the something else is, you know what, we don't give all those questions an answer in the show. We just present like all these confusing dilemmas to Spawn, going, wow, now I don't know what I'm going to get back to Wanda. I don't know how I'm going to like solve my life. I don't know how I'm going to act like a man. And on top of it, I'm dealing with like angel bitches that are vampires that work for God. Like, wow, I mean, the longer I think about this, the more my head kind of explodes, because like none of it makes any kind of sense. And it's part of the overall mission of Satan to keep Spawn confused, because if he doesn't figure out how to break his curse, then he will continue to be a terrific hellspawn for forever, ultimately, if he can keep him in a state of either A, confusion, or B, seclusion, which is why he wants him to be in the alleyways, hidden away, hunkering in the shadows. Now, God put him there specifically because there's a moment that we have where, again, he crosses into the domain of God in another episode. But again, that if you're going to be in the alleyways, it's up to Satan to say, you know what, let's just hide you away and get you away while you're kind of dealing with all this bizarre stuff, like the floating eyeball just came out of there. Isn't that the coolest? Like, you know, I mean, somewhere along the line, you got to self-indulge to all this kind of like cool kind of, you got to put the gross stuff in there every now and then, and we can't be completely suspense drama, because again, I have to know that like a lot of people came to this dance because, again, they like the gunfights and they like the cussing and they like the like kind of cool, you know, kind of Japanese, you know, kind of feel that we put into the show. And so we just snuck one in there really cool. So if you actually go back and play that in slow motion, her whole face just becomes what we call Mung Fing, and it disintegrates right in front of you, and it's kind of cool. So he gets rid of one angel here now, and then what ends up happening, he has to fight a second one. And she says, no, you know what, because I have more honor than the last one, I want you to get strong, because it's not heroic for me as an angel to kill a foe who is injured. There's no honor in that. So she told him to basically go make yourself strong, so this will be an even fight, and when you get to that point, then we'll have an even match. So now we end this moment here where he goes back to his grave, and he's got the injuries, and the bugs come and they replenish him, and he gets strong here, and he recaptivates all his powers to some degree. And we do a little bit of arty-farty stuff here. And then look at this. We get our big cape shot. And we get our big dramatic ending here of Spawn. And there's our boy, the Sentinel of New York City.
And restored his power.
Melodrama. It's such a wonderful thing. Now we have another story here, and this is the telling of the backstory of Al Simmons and his unfortunate betrayal, if you will, of the only guy that he trusted, which is Major Forsberg. Major Forsberg, as we met earlier in the opening of the DVD, that is now long-haired and trapped away in solitary confinement under the reign of Jason Wynn's people. Was given to Jason Wynn by Al Simmons. This is actually the story of that here, that we have Al Simmons going into the deep African jungle. For all intents and purposes, Major Forsberg had gone native, if you will, and it's now Al Simmons' duty, command, order to now go in there and get this man. So again, going back to some of those decisions we talked about the good patriot doing things in the name of following orders. This is one of those, instances where Al Simmons knows that this is sort of kind of his friend. This is his mentor, the guy who taught him a lot in life. And he has to go in there and take him back to civilization and can't let him just continue to live this moment of peace that he has found, given that he's found this sort of Zen Buddha kind of environment here that is sort of to his liking. You're going to see that he's going to come into this quiet, serene, calm building here, temple, and it's now gonna just get crazy here in a few moments, because again, it's somebody has crossed the line, and the outside world has now come into this quiet realm that we all try to escape to, that we sometimes trying to shut out the reality of the rest of the planet. Al Simmons is going to wake up traumatically again from this experience, because again, this is actually a flashback here. But this was actually the story that when we did was the most difficult in terms of editing, because it was the last show that was delivered to us out of order that actually had the roughest animation overall. So we had to do a lot of cutting and redrawing and refixing of it. One of the things we wanted to do here was do a little bit of kind of staccato cutting and give a little bit of a play of that it goes dark and light depending on how much the person is pulling the trigger of the bullets on his gun and on his submachine gun, as we continue to push into the thing that controls everything that's going right now, which is this mask of Genghis Khan. So now what started off as being a kind of a serene moment is now turned into, again, most action movies, something that has just sort of literally been completely stripped of anything that had any kind of semblance of order to it, and is now completely chaos. We now get the moment here where Al Simmons looks to his mentor. We get the brief flash of insanity in him, because again, as we showed earlier when we saw the first kill Al Simmons had made, this is actually now the Al Simmons who years later has actually done this so many times now that it's just become second nature to him. So that look there is almost an adrenaline rush that is part of him. So when we had made the motion in the saying early in the first episode at the beginning of this DVD that first flashback of Al Simmons killing is when heaven and hell kind of turn their eyes towards him, that it has now continued to progress, and we're trying to show different hits in different parts of this guy's life that basically have now gotten him to the point where when he did die, that there was a justification as to why Hal was drafted him and thought he would be such a good warrior. If they had just picked him at the moment when he was defending his buddy in that jungle out in at the beginning of the show, then that wouldn't have been enough for us to go, oh, he's not that bad of a guy. He just was trying to seek revenge on his buddy. But now we've started to see different glimpses of things where it's almost like by following the orders of what were given to him, he almost sort of kind of enjoyed what it was that he was doing, and more importantly than that, he actually became very good at it. We then reestablish again Major Forsberg here in his little hole that he's been sitting in. He's kind of old and ragged, and he's trying to do some kind of little chanting, casting a little bit of spell to keep a little bit of sanity into his life, given that for the most part he's been locked away in this kind of solitary confinement and with minimal light and minimal food put in front of him. And he sort of became the strong, powerful man that, was somebody to look up to, and has now become this withered old soul that basically is sort of kind of fragile. Here comes Jason Wynn, asserting his dominance over him, trying to ask him about the power of the mask, and saying that, again, if you don't give me the answers that I want, then there are ways for me to get it. And part of what we have here was actually based upon a comic book story that I wrote, which is that he has gone and visited his, Major Forsberg's wife and son, and he brings a couple of remnants of what he knew to be very special to his boy and to his wife, and that they're hidden in the box, and he doesn't have to make any kind of overt threats. He just lays the box there and then walks away and allows the man to melt away, knowing that, what it is that is being laid in front of the table is that if you don't give me what I want, then essentially I will kill your family here. Now, given that, all this stuff for the last, 2.5 hours has been, fairly heavy-handed and this sort of, kind of this dark, murky world that doesn't have, on a lot of levels, my wife would say, redeeming qualities to it, we do try to have fun with some of the humor in there and do some of the like I said, family affair and fun stuff that is around there. And later on in this story here, again, we'll have another scene with Cyan in there and my little girl who, again, for the rest of this dialogue, at least for near the end of this, instead of boring you with more kind of behind the scenes, insight into what the show's about, we'll bring in a couple of people, my 2 little daughters, and see, given that this is the first time they're actually, as I'm viewing this right now and recording this, they're actually watching it for the first time because they've never been allowed to actually watch it at home. So, luckily Mom's not around, because otherwise we'd be getting in trouble right now. And Al Simmons, the man that I named the Spawn character after, is also here in studio, and we'll talk a little bit about, why we think that the Spawn character is so strong, given that the real Al Simmons goes around the country and talks to people about Spawn and has some of the insight that I don't have on a day-to-day basis, given, that I'm usually tied into some of the Hollywood and business dealings that I do and some of the other ventures that I put together here. We have the setup here of an added a thing here that you don't usually see in animation, which is subtitles, and we actually had the voice actors learn their lines in actual true Cantonese and Chinese dialect. And it said they are saying exactly what's up on screen there. And again, just something that adds to the level of making this an R-rated kind of adult drama, so that it has those elements that we're used to seeing when we actually, watch primetime network shows and or go and pay our money for R-rated movies. Again, things that 8-year-olds don't necessarily gravitate towards, but that we actually believe makes more sense to it. This close-up right here of Jason Wynn is interesting because we tried to get this rule of thumb sent across to the animators, and it was only starting to come near the end, where the best animation in the show ended up coming when we did 3 things. We did 2-tone coloring on the faces, and then we added the black. So there's actually 3 colors, black being one of them, that you get like your flesh tone, you get your highlight color, and then you end up getting your black tone on top of it. So a lot of times we just had one color plus the black, but in this instance we try to come in there specifically and add 2 colors and the black. Now again, we have an inconsistency here, as you can see up on stage, but right there, that shot right there is closer to how, if we proceed into a 4th show and season and DVD, that we will be using that as our consistent rule of thumb, that we have 2-tone colors and we have black. Again, this shot right here indicates that moment right there. And the other rule that, again, sometimes got broken that I'll make sure happens is that Spawn should never, ever leave the blackness. That Spawn himself, his physical body, should never at any given time ever be separated from a shadow, because for all intents and purposes, he's just the physical shape of a shadow. So so that, again, no matter who he's talking to or where he's standing in the alleyways, that it should always have him and his black cape merge into either the shadow on the wall, the shadow being cast by another person, the shadow that's because the building is so condensed and close to each other, and that he essentially can just at any given moment take 2 steps back and merge into the shadows and disappear, much like a ghost. Which is why, again, we try to make him be a little bit of a boogeyman. Here's a scene here where Cagliostro, again, this messenger, that's trying to get Spawn to break his curse. Why? Because for all intents and purposes, there's a secret agenda that Cagliostro has, which is he wants to be free too. And the only way he can be free is if he can teach one Hellspawn to break his curse. Then, like the father, will say, okay, now that I sort of showed you how to steer away from not being a farmer, and now you've turned yourself into a CEO, given that I didn't know how to do that, can you now tell me, as the father, to be a CEO too? And so what he's trying to do is he's trying to say, Spawn, if you go down these 5 paths, you will not break this curse, because I went down them. But once you break the curse, I don't know how to do it myself, but once you break it, then make sure you tell me, because then I want you to give it to me so I can be free too. So all of his teachings are not because he's a wise old man and a sage like we all think he is, but it's because he has his own wants and needs, and he's trying to sort of say, I've got to be free myself. Now we introduce in here the scene where we've got Wanda, and we're saying that she's pregnant, and that it's actually not even about Spawn anymore. It's actually the seed that's been planted in her by Spawn's, romp in bed with her earlier on, and it's the new baby that's in Wanda that actually is going to have the final outcome of Armageddon, and we're going to end up seeing again that she's going to go and help Cyan here, given that she's going to hear the baby calling in the distance. There's little Katie. That's my little 4-year-old daughter. And we're gonna hear little Katie's voice, and it's named after Cyan. And again, you're gonna see that like all of what we've put together, all of this architecture here, is just sort of starting to build together. And one of the ways we can, build that is to actually, take all these different characters and, give them a unique personality, or, again, draw upon experiences that I've had in the past. Now, I don't consider myself to be, an overly ambitious or better writer than anybody else, or thought process person than anybody else, or even artist in terms of the comic book. But what I do know is I can draw from life. And so some of the inspirations that have been around me, obviously, are my family, which is one of the reasons why Al Simmons, his whole gig is to get back to his wife, Wanda, which is the name of my wife. But again, now that we've got the children involved, I end up bringing my family. So given that we've been heavy-handed and I've been sitting here saying, Spawn is this and Spawn is that, and you're getting behind the scenes, I thought we'd kind of open up the last half an hour here to talking to some of the people that have actually been a part of it. So I am currently joined by 2 very special people. One is Cyan, my 7-year-old daughter, who is actually named, like I said, after the character, and little Kate, my other daughter, who's 4 years old, that actually supplies the voice to Cyan, the character. So we just keep it all in the family. So, Cyan, if you would like, could you tell the audience that since you were probably, I created Spawn in 1992, and Cyan was born in 1991. She had no say into whether I was going to name the character after. Can you actually tell them whether you like being named after a character or no? This is the mic. You must speak into this right now. Do you like it when people go, you're the character from the movie, or no? Or from the TV show, or no?
Yeah, pretty much.
And like, did you know that that Cyan also got to be in the movie for a couple minutes, and that she actually was in the scene when she was 5, where they had it's a party scene in the movie where it's Cyan in the movie is having a birthday party, and she actually, it was only 2 weeks after her real party, and she thought the people in Hollywood were so nice for throwing her a special party herself that she got 2 parties that year. She didn't quite understand it was all a kind of a fake there. So, and now let me ask you a question. You don't get to do the voices for the Cyan character, right? Your little 4-year-old sister who you like to beat on all the time does, right? So, does that bug you or no?
Kinda.
Do you wish you could do the voice for her or no?
Yeah.
But do you like it that your mom on this TV show is named Wanda, like your real mom? Do you wish Spawn was named Todd, like me, so you could be like Todd and Wanda and Cyan, and we could just watch this show and just like sit around and self-indulge ourselves and not care about anybody else?
Sure.
And are you going to be an actress or a voice actress when you grow up? And do you want to be in the movies, or would you rather just like become a comic book artist like your dear father? What is the answer to the question?
I don't know.
Din, 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 din. Aren't you taking acting lessons right now?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
And do you think you could go and act like some of those kids like Ashley and Mary Kate Olsen? You think you could do some of that stuff one day?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
And when you watch your sister do the voice for you, do you wish you could like pound her face into the rug?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Because we know we can do it. Okay, now I'm going to talk to Katie, who actually does the voice. Miss Katie, if you could speak into the mic so they can see that it's the official...
Over here, over here.
Oh, yeah, over there. So they could see that it's the official Kate. So say something for the crowd so they can go, hey, we know that voice. That's that little girl. Go ahead. What's your name, please?
Kate.
And why don't you repeat one of your lines so they can see that, like, when you used to come in, say, Daddy, I want my daddy. Say one of those brilliant lines that you have in the show. Say that.
Daddy, I want my daddy.
Okay, so when Katie would come in to the recording sessions in Hollywood, she just loved it because why? There'd be like 10 actors and actresses there. There'd be free food. She loves that free food. She learned that from Dad. And then she would come sitting in there, and they would all treat her like a little princess because, again, she was the little 4-year-old and everybody else was an adult. So she didn't really actually like doing the recordings itself. She thought it was kind of stupid that she actually had to say everybody's lines 50 times in a row. But she did like, that everybody kind of like bent over backwards for her, and more importantly, that they actually gave her the free food. And on top of it, I actually get little checks in the mail because she's part of the union, and I get to like cash the checks and like live off my daughter now. So I can actually retire if she does a couple more gigs here. So Katie, what was the best thing about going into the Los Angeles and doing the voices? What did you like best about it?
Doing the voices.
You like doing the voice? And did you like it when Daddy made you say it like 10 times over and over and over?
No,
And why did you say "shut up, Dad" to me like 20 times?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. That was somebody else. So, did you like it when the other people would like be in there, the other voices, and they would help you and tickle you and have fun with you and give you free food?
Yeah.
And what was the highlight of going into Los Angeles? Was it going to Knott's Berry Farm afterwards?
No.
Oh, was it coming back and sleeping and drooling on Daddy's lap on the way home back to Phoenix?
No.
And what was it? What did you like best about being in the show? Do you like being your sister? Do you like being your sister on the show or no?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay, Cheyenne is feeding her the lines right now. So this is not spontaneous, folks. The little 4-year-old is now getting fed the 7-year-old lines here. So if she sounds wiser and older than you think, then it's because she is speaking through the parrot that is now Cheyenne, the 7-year-old. So you come over here. Come see Daddy. Come on over here. Get closer to Daddy's mic here. Okay. Now tell people, have you ever watched a Spawn cartoon before? No.
No.
Yeah. And why is that? Because your mother won't let you watch it, right?
No.
No. And are we watching it right now?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there lots of blood?
No.
Wow. Did you see any blood yet?
Yeah.
Did you see some guts?
Yeah.
Did you see any naked people?
No.
Any violence?
Yes.
Oh, sure. You're getting to see all the things that you haven't seen. I've been trying to protect you. The bubble has now burst right here, live in front of all you people today. The divorce papers, potentially, will be in the mail a little bit later here. But you know what? This is the one thing that I just must stress to my children. Don't tell Mom.
Take them out of here.
Wanda won't get far in this maze. My Chinese friends will have...
Okay, Cheyenne and Kitty, could you please tell the audience also who is your favorite superhero comic book?
This is a nice night.
Spawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Swan.
Oh, thank you guys. How come you never say that at home? Like now that you're going to be rich and famous here, what, all of a sudden you're going to suck up to the old man?
Well, when we were in front of all these people, he told me to say Pocahontas.
Yeah, well, that was Eisner and his group, so don't worry about it. You know, we're here now for the HBO people, and we have to actually like talk about like the Warner family. Okay, we're in the Warner Brother like mindset right now. So we have to talk like Superman, Batman kind of stuff. Okay, so we can't say Lion King out loud because again, potentially there are people listening who have like legality problems and issues with that. So, what is your favorite cartoon of all time?
Spawn.
Yes, even though she's never seen it before, she can just tell right now she's watching this and seeing Spawn get annihilated on screen right here, right in front of you. She now knows as a 4-year-old, this is the good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. The dancing frogs and little Muppet stuff, that's not what you want to expose the children to. This is where we're at. Actually, it's one of the things that people ask me about is do your children actually watch the shows? And to tell you the truth, other than like right now, the answer is no. Spawn, the animated series, has always been R-rated. It's always been something that I believe that, you know, once you're about 15 and older is sort of what the audience is and what it's going to appeal to. And that even the movie that was PG-13, even though Cyan had a small bit cameo spot in it, I didn't allow her to see that movie just until recently, and even still, it was just kind of like the good parts, if you will. So, little Katie here, who has never seen Spawn the animated series, the only parts she's ever seen are the ones that she has actually done the voices for. So she thinks this whole show is about Wanda and babies, and she doesn't understand why everybody makes a big fuss, because it's the only scenes I've ever actually shown her, right? So you want to do some of your lines again here, and then we'll let you guys go? Yeah. Okay, ready? I'll be Granny Blake, right? Cyan child, you grab an apple like Granny told you.
Why did you save my life?
Do you remember what your line was?
Yes.
Okay, say it.
All right, Grandma.
See? Good. So you memorized it. How come we couldn't do that good the first time we brought you into Los Angeles? We had to do overages and pay union fees and everything. It cost us. It got Daddy in a lot of trouble because you couldn't say it. See, now look at this. This is where the angel, which is the lady, is going to kiss Spawny. Look at that. See? So beauty is only skin deep. And there you have it. There's my moral that I'm trying to teach my children right there. Although I do have a very beautiful wife. Now, if we get into our last act here into the DVD, then this is the climax, if you will, as we get to Spawn discovering kind of like how all of this badness, this wickedness, this curse that has been planted upon him, this crazy world that's around him, can now sort of actually be used for good. We'll see it, that he figures out a way to sort of not only just stay like, you know, one footstep ahead of, you know, those that have been sent by heaven, but also at the same time convert some of that anger and that rage and that emotion into things that are sort of somewhat moving him forward. And going back to the conversation I had earlier, him acting like a true man. And as a true man, that means you must give of yourself to others, which is essentially what he will be doing here with Granny Blake later in the episode. And at the end of the episodes, he says that he will pledge everything he is to actually move beyond just being a man that hunkers into the shadows and just sort of cowers and will be more proactive instead of reactive to the world that's around him. Now, before we get to any of that stuff there, I mean, again, that whole climax is predicated upon, again, some of the mechanisms that we've put into not only the Spawn animated series, but again, in the upcoming sequel and the comic book. And let me say that if you like some of the things that we've been talking about here on this animated show, the writers of this series, John Leakley and Rebecca Bradford, are going to be writing the screenplay for the movie sequel. So some of the things that you see here and the attitudes of the city and the characters and the way that people are moving around in Sam and Twitch, some of that is actually going to be carried over into our mindset of who these people are when we go and we write the movie. So, if you like the style of what you're seeing here today, then I think that you're going to see that one of the goals that I had is that the comic books and the movies and the toys are all going to start to move towards the center and to start to dovetail, so you're going to get more consistency with the Spawn world. Originally, it was built to be just like 10 different doors to get 10 different people in, and now I'm trying to make it so that it just becomes one or two big doors that we can get the same two groups of people coming in there. But people have asked me over the years, like, Todd, what is it really that makes Spawn kind of like special to people? It's tough to sort of psychoanalyze a little bit of, your own kind of creations, if you will. But in the meantime, again, like I said before, I named the character Al Simmons after a real man named Al Simmons, who I went to college with, and we played baseball together. And again, we're still playing baseball today. Al works for me and has been around since the beginning of this gig, and besides our love for sports and hanging around our Mark McGuire 70 ball and the big collection, we go around the country, Al more so than I, dealing with the fans on a more day-to-day intimate basis, given that I have to hold down the fort of putting these shows together. So I'm fortunate enough to be joined here by Al himself, my good pal Al. And why don't we just open it up instead of analyzing all the scenes that are up on screen here right now? Let's just have a little bit of a rambling as to some of the thoughts and processes, not only that you've put together outside of what you've heard me say, but again, and why you think Spawn is successful, and what are some of the things, whether they're true or not, that some of the fans have told you as you've kind of circumvented the country as you go around.
I'll tell you, it's been pretty cool. And one of the major aspects of what people really get into about it is people feel like everyone has a little bit of Spawn in them. Everybody has lost something that they've hoped they could get back in their life. I've gotten fan mail from people who've been out at sea. Guys are out at, they're out at sea, and they'll write me and tell me, Al, I understand what you've been through, because I lost my wife. I went away to sea, and when I came back, my wife had remarried or has run off with my best friend. And, so a lot of people, elements which are in the story fit into their life.
Do you think, I mean, my take on it is that the easiest thing to hook them really is just that Spawn just kind of cool, right? And I think when they say that, it's not necessarily Spawn himself, but it's just like all the stuff around him, right? I mean, again, you watch the show here, when we had that gun just coming up, we did like, a flutter cut on it, so that, again, there was a style there. And again, when he's in the alleys, he's all kind of dark and spooky, and everything takes place at 4 o'clock at night or something like that.
Well, a lot of that, too, has to do with you maintaining the creative control over the whole thing. I know some of the earlier episodes, there's things that the fans out there, you guys don't get to see. It's the things that we don't accept, the things that Todd says, no, that's just not quality enough. I've said, it's from something as simple as to the look of Spawn's eyes. I mean, it's all a feel, and if that feel isn't there, then it's got to be changed to be made to what you want it, to what we want it to be. I think you look at it from, if this is done from the aspect of Todd sitting out there going, if this was me, what would I want to look at? What would I want to see? Be it the monsters, be it the characters, be it the storyline, all that. It's just done from a perspective of what we think the fans want to see.
Now, what we're getting into here in the show here, I'll digress just a bit, is Granny Blake gets dropped off home here. And she's going to have a bit of a heart attack here and be taken to the hospital. But this is then where Spawn can come a little bit later and visit her in the hospital, because, again, Granny becomes the only person that Spawn can really open up his heart to, given that everybody thinks either A, he's a monster, or B, he's dead. He doesn't even exist, right? She's the only one that accepts him as Al Simmons, and what she sort of has in her locked mind, given that she can't see, has to, accepting him for what he is, which was the kind, gentle man that was married to her granddaughter here. But again, as we get closer to the climax, then I'll bring some more specifics into the equation here. But we've been on the air now for 3 years. We've obviously made the toys and the comics and all those kinds of things. As the audience has gotten older, do you believe that they also, too, have sort of become more sophisticated into what it is we got to... I mean, I get a sense of, like, I got to stay on my toes because they expect me to keep pushing this thing forward, right? You know, they don't want Spawn from 5 years ago to still be the same as he is today.
That's why the storyline has to adapt. That's why you have to come up with. That's why the characters, be it Sam and Twitch, you have to make them more element of the story so that you can run off on and do more in-depth storylines. Be it like the child molestation things that we've done, things that were cutting edge where you've gone where no one else dares to go. That's the things that people want to see. The clown, be it the violator and all that. You don't see that in the HBO animation. And the next movie that comes out is going to be more on the done like the HBO has done. It's going to have that feel.
What's the audience that's out there is? What would be the typical audience, you think?
Oh, shoot, do you mean age-wise or do you mean age-wise? Yeah. Oh, 18 on up. I mean 18 on up because people get it. Once you get older, you have things that have happened to you in your life. You've lived through a few situations. You've had people betray you. This is a story about betrayal and trying to get back to figure out, who did me wrong. And there's not... I got to say, the average fan out there, everyone has had somebody do something to them that they just went, why did that happen to me? What did I do to bring this on to myself? And, it's all those little questions that people ask themselves every day.
Okay, but the question really that I believe most people want to know is, are you built like Spawn? Are you buffed or are you just a cream puff?
I'm not a cream puff, but at the same time, yeah, I do wear a muscle suit under the costume when I go out.
They're augmented muscles when he's out there, folks. Those aren't the goods.
Yeah, but
they're kind of like the equivalent of foam breast implants, if you will. So if it looks like he's got a small head, it's not that he has a small head. It's just he's got big fake muscles when he's walking around.
But how cool to don this costume, go out to a comic convention where I met many of you fans at, and walk around. And once you put that costume on, you take on that persona. You become the character. You feel it. And and to have the fans come up to you and go, wow, man, that costume's kick-ass. You look cool, and that's what it's all about. It's just a feeling, and it works. And do I enjoy it? Tremendously. Am I honored to be this character and that, you guys out there has accepted me as this character? Outstanding, So we're just having a lot of fun. We're twisting the envelope a little bit. We're just going places. We're doing things.
Yeah, and to paraphrase what he just said is, I'm losing my grip on reality, folks.
Hey, there you go. Right, yeah. A grip he never had, so
he is the widget. I make widgets, and he is the widget. The walking 6-foot widget here. Now, here's a scene here that, again, if you can switch me off if you want, or if you want to replay it here, this is really a very telltale dialogue scene that was written by John and Rebecca. That it's the moment that I gave them that, again, I had this kind of sense about my own, wife's grandmother, the 97-year-old that came from the old country. And her husband died when she was young. And I always had a sense that if she knew she was going to live 30 years past the death of her husband, she may have moved on in the world. And I think she sort of kind of accepted that, because she was about 65-ish when her husband died, that she just assumed that, like, I'll be dead in a couple years later. Not that she wasn't, happy, but she just assumed 65 is old. He died. He's 65. I'm 65. We'll die. And she didn't really move on in terms of, like, sharing herself with somebody else. In terms of sharing her love with people. And again, my guess is, as much as I love my wife personally, she's still young. She's, just over 30. And that if I passed away, although I can't think about it realistically of wanting to have her in love with another man, it would be a shame for her to just lock herself away and hide away from sharing herself, because she has so much to give, right? It's one of the reasons
that would be a bad thing.
Right. It's one of the reasons why I do not believe there is sentient thought after you die, because it can't be, and you can't be looking down in the earth and seeing stuff, because you got to see that other, like, as much as I'd like to, like, look down and see my children as I die, I don't really want to see them in bed with their husband. I don't want to see my wife remarried to somebody. I can't comprehend that in my brain. So it's just more of I just would rather say she will continue to give out love, and I accept that she's a nurturing person and she will continue to do that. This is the conversation that Spawn just had with Granny Blake, which was, Granny, what regrets do you have? And the regret was that I didn't know I was going to live so long. Maybe I should have done something a little bit different, given that everybody thought that she had all the answers, and that he says that he lives with regrets too, and that somehow we have to all sort of get past it. We have in this show really three big climaxes. We have the one here with Jade, which he has to solve the problem not only between him and his relationship with Jade, but Jade's relationship with her duties towards her boss, which in this case happens to be Heaven. We have the climax of Sam and Twitch finding out that the Inspector Chief Banks is the bad guy, and we have that Spawn finds out that he can take some of his powers and do good with Granny Blake. So we actually start to run now the three of these back to back to back, and we get three different scenarios in the outcome of all of this. That from the bad, from the darkness, does come some good, because unfortunately old Jay doesn't do too good at the end of this scene, and Chief Bank doesn't do too good in his scene. And Spawn, out of all that, you go, well, what's redeeming about this? That we see at the end of the show that Spawn actually steps out from the darkness and says, I'm ready to try and get away and distance myself from all of this craziness. I want to be a man. I would dedicate myself to being that, and we have to start to strive towards it. So we now have the cops and robbers stuff. I know it's one of the things that we're trying to change both in the comic books and trying to put on the circuit, and Al tries to spread to the people, is we're trying to keep this show and the other things we do, even in the writing of the sequel and the comic book, more urban. And I think people have a bit of a nervous twitch towards that they think that, like, oh, you're going to just make it a cop story, you're going to get rid of all the stuff that Spawn is. Do you hear that out there?
Yeah, I do a little bit, and that's not going to happen. And and some of the people I talk to, when I mention the movies to them, that like for the feel we're shooting for, be it a Silence of the Lamb or a Seven or something like that, they go, oh, cool, okay, you're going that route. But when I just say, if I don't tell them that first, and I just go, well, I don't think you're going to see as much of the clown might not be in there. You might not see the Violator, blah, blah, blah. And some people go, oh, wait, now, those were main guys. And, but some of those things, they have to be released. We have to move forward. And that's even like, I'll use Granny Blake. She's one of those characters. She's blind. Granny's going off of blind faith. And that's just like, she can't see what's happening around her, so she does everything through feel. But there are people out there right now in society who can see, that go off, that are still blind to things that are going on around them, if you understand what I'm saying there.
And so, and the other thing, too, is that I think that sometimes the reaction is that when I tell people I want to go more urban, which is what I believe we've done, more drama. This is drama. What we have in front of us right now is drama. That now the two cops find out that the guy who's their boss is really the bad guy. I mean, Twitch says that, My whole life was being a cop, was believing in cops and going and getting the bad guys, and now you, the cop, are now the bad guy. It becomes a problem to him. And so just because you replace drama with action, I don't think you necessarily lose any of the interest in the story. But it's like, here's Sam roughing up the guy too. We have our action. I mean, they were trying to jump out of the way of the oncoming subway. I mean, all of that's there. I as soon as you start saying you want to make it real, I think people forget like how exciting life can actually be. It just means we're not going to have bazooka fights. We're not going to have alien Armageddons coming down invading Manhattan.
But what we will have is a story with substance that you can go off on, and we can go other avenues. Having the cops, you and Sam and Twitch, using them as the basis and being able to play off of those two, outstanding. It makes endless storylines of things we can do.
We have, and again, the ending of this here is that although Sam wants to basically like take the guy down himself, Twitch, and again, all of this to me is like relevant. Twitch is the one that actually stops Sam from basically continuing to pound on Chief Banks. Why? Because he doesn't want Sam to lower himself to that standard, right? And Sam just going, how am I going to get some justice around here? And Twitch, the one that was shot, actually has more compassion for Chief Banks than Sam does at this given moment. But now we get our second climax, because we saw that Jade actually died at the hands of Spawn, which she needed to do. But it was in a loving, tender way, because she knew that she would be kind of haunted by the angels. The angels were coming for Jade. But now we get our climax right there. which is they laid the gun down next to Chief Banks and they walk away and they go, do us all a favor because either you're going down in the papers or you can figure it out yourself. Again, we haven't completely lost all the fantasy elements, right? Because again, we had the clown. Right? Every now and then we sneak the clown in there. We haven't lost them, but we've just given that thing where how much of these emotions and these influences are sort of being manipulated by kind of like evil when it's sort of all spinning around us. And Chief Banks ultimately basically puts a gun to his head and takes himself out because he can't bear the fact that he's going to basically be embarrassed not only in the media but in front of his friends and his family. Here, like I said, here's the second act that I gave, that Jade gets shot by her own kind. The two angels here aren't actually here to hunt down Spawn. They have now come to say that Jade, her duty was to actually take out the Spawn. Jade found out that Spawn himself had a good side, that she could see a bit of redemption in him. She had been testing him. But those other two angels that will soon break in here are going to be coming up to them going, if you fail at killing the enemy, then not only do we have to sort of go after the enemy eventually, but we have to like take you out. So their contract right now isn't for Spawn. Their contract is somebody said that Jade's not doing her job. And so now she's had the conversation saying the only way I will be free from being hunted by my own kind, and my own kind is from heaven, and again, this is where we get into the twisted theology and the gray matter, is if she dies at the hand of the enemy, and the enemy obviously is Spawn. So she's telling him right now that you have to kill me, right? You have to. If you don't kill me, then my own people will kill me, and I'd rather die and have a peaceful life and let my soul have a nice resting place than to be tortured forever. Because if they take me out, then my soul, like yours, is going to be tortured forever. And he now, although he doesn't want to do it, he eventually comes around to seeing that like he doesn't want her to be as tortured in the afterlife as he himself has been. So now they've had the conversation, and she's given him the loving eyes, the puppy dog eyes, saying, please, you have to do this to me. And he doesn't want to. She's trying to force him to do it. He doesn't want to do it. He goes, I can't do this. I won't do this. I won't do this to you. I love you. I've already lost everything that I love. But again, the choice now almost becomes taken away from him, that he's now stuck in the middle of a high stakes game. The angels are behind him. And now he says she's either going to be tortured forever or I have to release her because I wish somebody would release me. So he has to. Cyan is in the room here. She just covered her eyes because she's not used to seeing all this stuff. So it's not good for 7-year-olds, folks. And so he takes out the angel and Jade, and he loses again somebody else that he loves. And now the answer is that at least he gave her some peace. And he's going to step aside, and he's going to see now that the angels are going to say, oh, okay. Now now the angels saw at that moment that she was fighting the bad guy, the Spawn, the enemy, and she died at the hands of the enemy. So now she will actually be taken back to the gates of heaven and be given kind of the proper burial of a hero who died in battle, and she will be held in a high esteem.
And what's good here too, even you can look into Spawn's eyes and feel what he's feeling. You can't look into a lot of the other characters are out there. They don't cry. They don't show emotion. They aren't supposed to show feelings. You get all of that with this character.
And again, here is. This was the ending that I'd lived with literally for about a year and a half, which was that I wanted to have the moment where we actually get Spawn doing something nice, that he actually sees that with any kind of power, you can either use it for good or for evil. So he comes to Granny, who now has recuperated from some of her injuries here, and comes up to her and literally hugs her in his cape, wraps her up, brings her into the black abyss that's the inside of his cape because it's just all bizarro stuff, and does two things for her. One, turns her young, or at least in her mind's eye she's young, and two, gives her sight. She hasn't had sight for a long time. She wasn't born blind. It came later in life through diabetics. But now she actually gets to see her husband who had passed away, the husband that she thought that she should have sort of died with, like, because she's sort of guilty that she lived beyond him. And now she gets to meet her husband, and her husband, for all intents and purposes, is saying, you need to live, you need to live and you need to love. And no matter what you do here on earth will not stop me from waiting for you when you actually finally die. I will be waiting for you forever. So go and live to your fullest, and I will always be waiting for you. And ultimately, it's what Granny says back to Spawn, that instead of worrying, instead of being a peeping Tom at Wanda's house, that the answer is maybe you and Wanda will be together. It might not be in this world. That don't worry about trying to fix what's broken now. It will eventually all take care of itself in the afterlife, and that you and Wanda will basically be kind of remarried, if you will, at another given time. It's just not in this tangible form. And it becomes sort of a telling moment, A, for this climax, and B, it actually gives us the starting point for us to take off into the next season of saying, oh, I don't have to sit here and say, woe is me. The answer is I will get Wanda potentially back. And so now it's time for me to move on and to actually get like a life, literally, to get a life. And that's what we have here. We have about a minute left. And this is where we get him coming into Cagliostro saying, like, I am ready. I now understand everything you've been telling me. I now understand what it is you've been trying to pound into my head. Sorry, I've been acting like an adolescent. I didn't quite understand it, Dad, but I am now ready. I'm tired of living this life. And he turns to him and says, what are you prepared to do? And his closing line is, I will give everything to basically move on from this moment. And essentially, we then pick up with the next go-round of Spawn then saying it's time to basically have a life and to basically like stop being a whiner and to keep moving on and go. So, and hopefully we haven't bored all of you folks out there, and you're still hanging around with us. And I just want to thank you for listening to some of the ramblings of the madman that is sort of kind of involved in this. I'd like to thank John Leakley and Rebecca Bradford for helping bringing some of those ideas to the screen in written form. And again, the whole crew at HBO Animation that was able to put it into visual form and trying to bring those together, and the animation studios that helped do it. Let me also say that the show has always been kind of an ongoing guinea pig and will continue to be so, and that hopefully each year we can bring another revolution or revelation, either way, to what it is that we start to use as kind of defining Spawn. I believe that as the years go by, what it is that defines Spawn isn't nearly as simple as 5 words. It becomes 20 and 25 words, and pretty soon I'm not going to be able to contain it in less than a half an hour. So this is just hopefully the third kind of installment of a 50-year kind of trek that I would be taking with Spawn. So enjoy yourself, and we'll have another talk about this in the fourth segment. Thanks.
Talk too much, Dad.
Yeah, thank you.